No point having this open with King Crimson because they're not on Spotify.
Yeah. Really, they're on Spotify. They're far too busy and important to be on Spotify.
Should we do King Crimson then?
Yes, I think we should do King Crimson. This is a historic moment. Here we are. Here it is. And if you're mad and you keep buying albums again, there's the third version of it that I bought. It's not the 15th release, but I bought it 3 times. I think I had the definitive edition. Then, but the 30th anniversary, it sounds exactly the same. So then I had to buy the 40th one because it's a big box, but also because the Steve Wilson remix helps tremendously. So yeah, where do we start? Yeah, it's a definitive moment in the catalogue. It's a definitive moment in rock. And it mirrors in the chorus in that it's not definitive. The songs are definitive, but the versions of the songs, maybe by the first track, are not definitive versions in that it wasn't particularly recorded well, the sound is kind of horrible. There's wonderful live versions of all these things, so except for the opening track, you can find better versions elsewhere. So it's one of those strange things, and yet it's such a big deal to King Crimson fans. It's usually it's the one, it's the moment. It's kind of year zero, in that everything that has preceded it really was like prehistory. This is where Fripp found his thing for the first time, you know. So everything that came before was different bands, really. Is it the same band? Kind of is. I think when at the time of In the Court, Fripp was saying, "What if Hendrix played Bartok?" That was the thing, and although it's a bit silly, that is really meaningful. If you listen to In the Court, there's something in that. But at the time of this, he was saying, "What if Hendrix played Stravinsky?" And that's the best way of reviewing this album, I think. We don't need to say anything else, because that really suits it, I think, in that In the Court is brutal, but there's something else with Larks Tongues In Aspic that you can't articulate. So there's no point in reviewing it. Okay, bye.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me a guest on In the Court of the Wenton Knave. Well, it's very difficult because, as you say, this is a very, very big deal. You know, I mean, King Crimson represents something that traditionally I probably wouldn't go for, in the sense that I think it's very sort of highfalutin. The process of making the music and composing the music feels almost more important than the actual music itself. Although, in this instance, it's not, because the music is absolutely fantastic, and that's why I'm here, really, I suppose.
Yeah, this is good.
Really like it. King Crimson are something quite special because, you know, they have a lot of classical influences, and a lot. I think there's a certain the minimalist thing that, you know, they draw a bit of inspiration from. Is the kind of stuff I like to listen to piano wise. So I think there's a bit of crossover there. It's when you actually, I mean, you can listen to this album and you can enjoy it, and then you can listen to it and you can think of actually how you would go about composing something like this. How would you arrange it in your mind so that you could explain it to other people to and you just couldn't do it. You just think there's something there that it almost feels like they've been messing around with their instruments
and something accidentally fallen out.
Tripped on it, but it's happened like 1,000 times.
Yeah.
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 It's just sort of, I mean, it is very definitive prog. I mean, that gives prog the sort of the thing that we really look to, that kind of...
Why is prog good?
Yeah.
That.
Because there is the pursuit of the something new that sounds brilliant, you know, pushing the boundaries of music without breaking them so it sounds bloody awful. Basically, and that is, you know, that exemplifies it probably more than any other album. You say that the recording wasn't so good. I actually find that particularly good is the tone of the violin.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
That's true.
It sounds appropriate, and it sounds like a violin, which I think sometimes the sound engineer can fail to record quite well.
That's true. Well, actually, by the time we watch this, we may well have done a yellow.
Yeah, but so I agree. It's virtually pointless reviewing the album because it's obviously so good, and this is more of a homage than a review, I suppose.
Yes, yeah. It's a celebration of awesomeness.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a suggestion. I suspect this comes from Jamie Muir. We'll talk about it in a bit. That It's about the birth and death of the universe. So Larks Tongues Part 1 is the Big Bang, and Larks Tongues Part 2 is Armageddon. That's the idea. But you give it literal meaning. You take away the whatever it says about the human condition. That's frightening. That's amazing. That's oh my god. I think Fripp said when they were playing the early version with the previous band, it's inspired by the sort of horrors of big cities. But again, it sounds all right, doesn't it? But it doesn't. That doesn't give you what that does. You know what that amazing album does. So, yeah. Following on from, I've just talked about the previous tour quite a lot in 10 episodes. During that tour, Fripp met with Bill Bruford because they did a bit of gigs with Yes. It's funny how Yes fans treat the fact that Bill left, because normally in Yes you're supposed to be fired, and they'd fired lots of people up to that point, but Bill left. That's like, we can't do that. And the other members of Yes still to this day don't understand why he left. To me, it's fine. It's, you know, he's a musician. He's not a rock star. He's not, you know. There's a fantastic quote where he says about, I think I've said this before, about the idea is to make music with different people. You know, and in jazz, which obviously Bill talks about all the time, you play with different people because you get better and you get to do different things. And, you know, in rock, you mingle blood and become blood brothers and live together forever. Live in a house, because they all live in a house together, and make millions and then retire to grow vegetables. I think I've said that before, and that's actually a Bill Bruford quote. And obviously that first album he did with them just exemplifies that so perfectly. It's nothing like Close to the Edge whatsoever. It has nothing in common with it, and yet they get lumped together. They're prog. They're both definitely prog, but it has nothing in common. The only thing they have in common is band members and Genesis. It's different. It's nothing like the other bands. And ELP is nothing like any of this. And it's almost, it's an era, or something was happening, man, or it was just the Beatles. The Beatles made it happen, or something. And that thing that happened has finished. It has finished now.
I think what sets we say they're all prog. I think what sets King Crimson apart from the other bands are, I talk about Yes and their crazy ideas as inspiration for songs. The ideas for the songs in King Crimson are, they're sort of higher than the music. There is something external in the sense that, you know, these have been through many arrangements, these songs. I mean, we went to see it with
the new band.
With the new band, 3 drummers, and
they played most of it.
They played most of the album. And
actually, it was the next night they played most of the album. They played on the album. The night we saw, they played Larks Tongues Part 1 and Easy Money. That was it, I think. Mm-hmm. But the next night, they took a couple of things off and they played Talking Drum and Larks Tongues Part 2 as well. So nearly the whole album.
So yeah, I mean that's arranged for 3 drummers, and it's definitely the same music, although obviously the arrangement is different. So there is, without getting, Sarti said, you know, he did like the Gymnopédies, and it's the same piece of music viewed from different angles, and that's what King Crimson tracks are almost like. They're like there's a core idea of music there.
Yeah, but
they're looking at it from one angle, but in a later incarnation, they're looking at it from a slightly different angle. But it's definitely the same piece of music.
It's still King Crimson.
It's still King Crimson. Whereas if you take a Yes album or a track, or a Genesis album or a track, and you did the same, and it went through the same process, it would be different. It would be different. It would be different music.
Yeah, and probably not as good. But with whatever King Crimsons do. It's not that it's better or worse, it's different.
It's a different take on the same thing. And whatever that thing is very hard to define in words or even images. It feels like it can only be defined in music, yet different arrangements of that music bring you to the same idea. It's quite profound, really, and trying to understand that is a very difficult thing about this type of music.
It's a real musicology heavy thing. There is a good. Oh, it's actually in the book that's the camera is sitting on, so you can't see that. Sorry, but there's a really good piece in a book called Progressive Rock Reconsidered, which was really slagged off being a bit too academic. But there's interesting opinions in there, and there's a piece about Larks Tongues, which is quite interesting. Yeah, Yes fans think Bill Bruford was bitter. He's bitter about leaving Yes. the sort of bitter look on his face when he's playing it. Why does he look like that? Oh, it's because he's bitter about leaving Yes. Yeah, he left Yes and he's bitter, so he has a permanent expression on his face. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Interesting, Fripp was actually offered the job to replace Peter Banks, the original guitarist in Yes, to play on the Yes album, interestingly, which he declined.
Politely.
So yeah, Bill Bruford given a reading list when he joined the band, which is quite funny, of Fripp's stuff. I can't remember what the books are actually. Never mind. And it's interesting that Bill's seen as a jazz drummer. He always talks about jazz. He thought Yes were jazz and it was a trick when he first joined, but he wasn't brought into this band as the jazzo. Jamie Muir was the guy that played with all these freeform jazz people. So Bill was brought in as the rock drummer, actually, the man who would keep the beat. Interestingly, so is Bill a jazz drummer? That's the question. John Wetton, of course, was offered the job in the previous band as well, but declined it at that point. John Wetton was not a singer. This is the interesting thing. On this album, he's not a singer, and that works in his favour hugely. He definitely got better at singing, but I think the fact that he wasn't a singer meant he wasn't like Greg Lake. And his approach to the vocals is that raspiness. Obviously, is unique, and obviously gives this lineup that edge that none of the other lineups have. The smoother vocals of Adrian Belew, and actually, Jacko is the closest, but he's still not the same as John Wetton. And I think that's why. It's because he wasn't a singer then. He was a bass player then. I think he'd done some backing vocals in one of the bands he was in. I was thinking Family, but I think that was after this. Maybe it wasn't. It might have been Family. John Wetton brought with him Richard Palmer James, who was the lyricist, wrote the lyrics. They decided it was a good idea to have an external lyricist who lives in Germany, I think in Munich, and they would send the music to him and he would write lyrics to it and send them back, rather than musicians trying to write lyrics. And again, that's a parallel with Yes, or a non-parallel with Yes. In that for Yes, they just wrote some words, and that sounds good. So I think that was a good idea. He sometimes gets slagged off for being a bit heavy-handed, but I don't necessarily agree with that. But I don't think that applies to this album at all. That's a bit later. There is a change of lyric on here, which is later on some different lyrics on Easy Money. That's interesting. I mean, I do think the bass from John Wetton is a foil to Fripp, in the same way Chris Squire is a foil to Steve Howe. That really is a parallel. I think that's true, in that John Wetton does the heavy, loud bass player stuff, which means the guitarist doesn't have to do the heavy, loud guitarist stuff, and that's one of the things I really like. So that is a real parallel with Yes, actually. So John Wetton brought that in, and I think, allegedly, not the first time. So Fripp had already offered Wetton the job, but John Wetton later on, this was after the Islands lineup, I imagine, he drove past Fripp's house and saw him in the window in Dorset and stopped his car and went in, and that's how he joined the band. So it seems ridiculous, but apparently that's Fripp was looking out the window, so he saw him. Oh, there's Robert Fripp. Let's go and see him. So you've got these established, capable, European biased players. So it's unlike the previous band. He's not going to have any problem with people wanting to do scat and stuff like that. But the question is, how do you've got good players, but how do you achieve what the '69 band achieved, which he failed to achieve with subsequent bands? Well, you get another drummer, don't you? Because so much of it is about Michael Giles, although he didn't contribute writing very much on that first album. His drumming style is what makes it symphonic, if that's the word. But the answer is you get two. You get one person to do the freeformy stuff, the jazzy stuff, the percussion stuff, and a really good, interesting drummer as well. And that gives it that power. And it surpasses it. Obviously, it surpasses the '69 band. It surpasses the first album because of that. So you have Jamie Muir. I think there's an argument that, Jamie Muir left so suddenly. He left pretty much after the album was done. So I think February '73 he was gone. So the live stuff we've only got the live stuff before they did the album, actually. I think in a way Bill started doing what Muir was doing after that. So that became a Bill Bruford thing. But he learnt an awful lot from this guy, doing his insane freeform stuff. And supposedly to see him live was great as well, because he would jump around and run around, and he'd have blood capsules and he'd bite them so he'd all go out his face and silly stuff like that. And a percussion cage for him to smash and blow whistles and do all this crazy stuff. But apparently it was impossible to record it, so there isn't really the live recordings we have don't really show that at all. And so this is the best representation of that. Although I don't think it's a well produced album, this is the best representation of Jamie Muir with the band. I think out of the recordings, because we don't know, because I wasn't there. So that might have been part of the reason why the sound I don't think is that good, because it was a lot of time would have been spent trying to record that. Interesting, it's 1973. It's also the same year as Dark Side of the Moon, which is another definitive moment in a very, very different way, which isn't really prog at all, in fact. And I think there's a yin and yang thing there with Dark Side of the Moon as well, and the fact that Dark Side of the Moon is so well recorded. It still sounds surround sound, and this sounds like it's recorded in a cupboard. And musically, there's such a difference. I mean, Jamie Muir is one of the classic. He went to study jazz at whatever school and decided that it was all that studying and everything would stop him actually playing, so actually left. He's that kind of person. A bit like, I wish I could remember his name, but the guy in Earthworks who he left his studies because he saw a piano with a sign on it saying not to be used for the playing of jazz, so he left. Yes. So he's a similar kind of character to that, I think. But obviously, been in all these freeform jazz outfits, the real extreme stuff, the controversial moment in jazz, and brought that to the table. So the fact that he did this and then left, to him, is normal. You do a bit and then you go. You don't stay there forever and then retire to grow vegetables. So I think it was 4 months, maybe, or 5 months he was in the band, and yet such an important part of the story. And you'll very rarely see a King Crimson biography without mention of Jamie Muir. It was a revelation for Bill Bruford. He's part of it, and obviously people talk about Bill Bruford. I was King Crimson without Bill Bruford. Oh no, this was Bill's growing up moment as well as Fripp's.
He openly acknowledges that, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's very open about that.
And maybe so on this, Jamie Muir is the essence of Crim, like Peter Sinfield was the essence of Crim in the first album. In that he's not part of the main thing that's happening, although what he's doing is fundamental, And the other thing is, Mel Collins has gone. Remember, he left. Mel Collins left, so it's possible he would have kept Mel Collins on, and we would have had saxophone on this. But interestingly, he went for a different sound. Rather than getting a third sax player, there will only ever be two sax players in King Crimson. We get violin, and that's the missing piece of the puzzle, really. Like you said, you mentioned the sound of the violin makes such a difference to the sound of the music. And again, there's only 3 albums with the violin on them. After that, it was just guitars. 15 million guitars. Even the keyboards are guitars. All guitars. And obviously, it gives it a wider sound, doesn't it? Having different instruments, so and influence things like Universe Zero to get even different instruments and gentler. In the midst of all this cacophony, the heaviest music ever made anywhere, you've got something fragile and gentle. In a way, a saxophone isn't. Saxophone's not gentle, is it? It's brr. And only a violin can do that. And a guitar can kind of do that kind of thing, but not in the same way a violin can.
Actually, the use of the violin is quite unique, because traditionally you either have a bank of violins, providing big harmonies that sort of,
or a principal player.
Or you have a principal player who's basically singing a melody.
Yeah.
And this doesn't really do that. I mean, the violin is obviously very identifiable and is sort of like a major line.
It's very rhythmic.
Yeah, but it's not singing. It's not melodic. There's definite,
kind of stuff. Yeah. Obviously, they agreed not to play Old King Crimson, which they managed for a while. Not maybe a year, maybe not a year. Maybe 6 months. And in the end they did play Schizoid Man and Cat Food, strangely. But it's interesting how the previous band really had problems with being heckled by the audience. Why aren't you playing Exiles? Even though they were playing the old songs. I don't think this lineup did. I would imagine going to see this for the first time when it's new would have been an amazing experience. With all the improvisations as well. It would have been like nothing. There would have been nothing like that before this time. And bear in mind, this is 1973, so according to history books, prog started in the mid-60s and sort of died out by 74. So that's interesting. There's a famous Fripp quote about if you want your band to keep going, keep playing the same stuff. Do what Yes do and just tour the albums and the band will keep going, the people will keep coming, and that way you die slowly. Whereas King Crimson expire suddenly because they do it and it's done, and then they're finished, which is infuriating and obviously traumatic for them, but makes better music. It's always that spark, you know. So yeah, in terms of the European rock question, what does European rock sound like? That one. I don't think there's anything else that says that as definitively as this one. It is European rock. You know, when you think about Yes, again, if you think about the Yes album, there's a lot of Americanism in there as well, from Steve Howe actually. So you know.
Well, actually, you go through, you listen to a lot of people who are big in prog rock, and they all cite an American influence.
Yeah.
A lot of prog rock bands were born out of the blues scene.
Yeah.
They decided that they were going to go play blues, and this ended up doing stuff much more interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you'd definitely say of King Crimson, there's never,
yeah,
never was it going to be
an
American style.
Bow.
25 minutes in, Kev.
No Pussyfooting was recorded simultaneously to this, so it was used as the intro tape with Brian Eno. So that's interesting. But obviously, there's playing on this, but the improvisations obviously didn't happen till they played live, and allegedly, Jamie Muir reckons this when they were walking on stage. What should we play? Oh, let's just improvise. I don't believe that. They must have had that conversation, but not when they were on stage. Come on. Fripp and Eno really did have that conversation, I think, which is believable. So that's not on here. So again, it's so definitive, and yet it's missing that key part of that lineup, which was the improvisation. The improvisation got better though, which I don't think I've talked about yet. I will be talking about. Yes, I will be talking about. I've already recorded it, but I will be talking about. I mean, it's about the sense of freedom on it as well. It has a sense of freedom which the other big studio albums like Red and like In the Court don't have. Red and In the Court are quite kind of, apart from the rubbish bit on In the Court, they're very dense, and the songs played. You know, there's a sense of freedom here, obviously, because there's some lots of playing on it in middle bits. You know, Larks Tongues 1 and Easy Money and Talking Drum, etc. So a lot of it is playing. That sort of really intense sense of freedom, which isn't on the others. Interestingly, David Cross even says there was discussion about what to call the band. I mean, whether that was a big thing or not, we don't know, because it was a new band. You know, obviously it was pretty obvious. It sounded like King Crimson. This is King Crimson, or it is now. I think when Fripp asked David Cross to join the band, he said he was making an Indian type album. I think I can understand that. I think I get that. There is an Indian music influence on there, not the obvious rock, Phrygian scale type stuff. Something else. But yeah, I get that, in that Fripp's been listening to Indian music, so there is something there. Interestingly, we're talking about Bill being so Euro, and you know, Islands is so sort of lush and jazzy. And when they played that lineup played Larks Tongues 1, it was jazzy. It was obviously a jazz thing. Now it's jagged and sharp and cut in your face like King Crimson should, and that means it rocks. It even has a rock single. It wasn't actually a single, but Easy Money is a rock single, and it's the one, you know, if they played anything from here on the radio, which they won't, if they did, it would be Easy Money, or an edit, maybe Easy Money probably. And yes, finally, I haven't talked about the cover. The cover is Trilogy of Life stuff, like Three of a Perfect Pair, Trilogy of Life, so, you know, the man is the sun, and woman is the moon, and child is the combined thingy. That's quite cool. The title of the album is Jamie Muir's title, Larks Tongues In Aspic. Obviously it's something beautiful, stored in aspic. So it's that harshness, but the sort of beauty of it. Larks Ascending is a thing, obviously. They deny they'd ever heard it, but there is a violinness that is very strikingly relevant. And it's one of those things where, as far as the band was concerned, they hadn't heard it. Maybe they'd heard it and they weren't aware of it, kind of thing. Is that possible? Do you think it's possible that something so close? It's like Paul Weller claims to have never heard 10538 Overture by ELO when he nicked the riff, and it is the same. His song is the same, but he insists he's never seen it. And I think I can believe it, that you can hear something subconsciously, and then you bring it back, and you don't realise.
Well, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like yesterday, when Paul McCartney says he dreamt yesterday and thought it was someone's song,
Yeah.
and he kept asking people, and no one. It turned out it wasn't someone's song. So that's the way. It's the way you write music, isn't it? You come out with something and you think, oh, that's good. Yeah, Larks Tongues In Aspic Part 1. First part of the album, played by the Islands band originally in a different arrangement. At their first rehearsal, interestingly. Supposedly about the birth of the universe, but obviously that doesn't do it justice. I love the marimba intro at the start. That's fantastic. That became a King Crimson-y thing from this point on, which wasn't on the previous albums. The jagged staccato guitar and violin. It is quite frightening, and it's not what guitarists are supposed to do. That's the thing. A guitarist shouldn't do that. A guitarist should go, not. And it is quite difficult. It's not hard to play the notes and play it. It's difficult to not make it sound wobbly, but the wobbliness works. Very difficult to get it exactly because it's so staccato. It's not cool barrel guitar Hendrix. So very, very fripp. And yet the main riff, I think I've said this before. Yeah, it's a year. It's about 18 months after Spoken Water. That must be another one of those coincidences. I'm sure it is. So that's quite funny. It must have been the heaviest thing on the planet in 1973. There's no death metal or anything like that. Even Sabbath is not as heavy as this stuff. Fastest mental jam ever. I can't remember what it's called. It's on the 2014 tour box. Just that section of it. I can't remember what it's called. It's called Ascending to Light or something. And so there was, I don't know whether that's the name of that section or whether they just called it that. So it's just awesome. You've got the violin Chinese bit, which wasn't originally on the early version actually, so they've added that bit. And you've got the big ending, and you've got the voices. And the voices are random things, they were reading out random stuff out of newspapers and things, I think. So yeah, second song, Book of Saturday, aka Daily Games. Again, written at the very first rehearsal. It's a traditional King Crimson ballad, so this is the lineage to the previous band, really. Maybe the only lineage to the previous bands in terms of actual notes. That could have been on any of the albums, I think. It's very good. Obviously, it's John Wetton's vocal debut. So it's very delicate, because obviously he's not a singer yet, so the way he would have sung it in Asia would have been very different to how he sings it. It's delicate, it's really good. Exiles, there's about 40 trillion live versions of Exiles. A lot of that is David Cross, I think that melody is David Cross. Obviously, Mantra from the 69 band finds a home, but played on the Mellotron, not played on guitar, interestingly. It means Travel Weary Capricorn never had a home, and it wasn't released until the Epitaph box set. But as much as I like Travel Weary Capricorn, it sounds naff by comparison to this great epic ballad, I suppose you could call it, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Really good. I think there's a lineage maybe from Epitaph.
Yeah.
Is it like Epitaph? Do you think it's like Epitaph?
A little bit. It's that King Crimson-y thing, isn't it? Where it's not quite easy to identify why something sounds the way it does, but there's definitely they've got that same sort of thing going on.
Yeah, I think there's a lineage to Baloo, or maybe the melody, maybe the vocals. You could imagine Adrian Baloo singing that. It's quite high for Wetton. Obviously, because he wasn't a singer yet, he didn't know what he should sing and what he shouldn't. So that's interesting. Easy Money. So, like I said, I think that's a single. Wasn't a single. And again, written in the initial rehearsals. There's 40 trillion live versions of this as well. It's not an improv, it's in the middle, it is a jam. But that's a good thing, because they're doing improvisations as well, So I think it's a pretty cool thing in the middle. The 2015 jam was fantastic and completely different. People do complain about too many live versions of Easy Money, but I love that middle section, it's always different. I do recommend the version on Night Watch as kind of, that should be the album version rather than this, because this sounds much more wimpy than some of the live ones. Might be the one which is least best on the album maybe, but it's all good. You've got some funny overdubs from Jamie Muir where he's stepping into some stones or something. That's the so that's kind of cool. But it's very in the background of the sound. It's not really coming out at you. The lyrics are different live. which I'll talk about. Well, actually, I've already talked about, but you haven't seen it yet. Talking drum. It benefits from being in the studio where they could do all the sound effects. There's a spinny thing, a spinner thing, and all that, which they couldn't do live. And yet it's better live, but it would be better live, this one, because of what it is, because it's a build. They didn't play it again from 74 until the double trio. But you can understand why the double trio would play the talking drum, because it's about building into an enormous racket with a screech at the end. Must have been a real release for them, especially it would have been at the end of the set as well. And obviously that screech comes into Larks Tongues In Aspic Part 2, and that's the definitive moment. I think some people really like Larks Part 1, but for me Part 2 is there's 4 parts to Larks, isn't there? You know, maybe sort of 5, but Part 2 is the one. There's nothing difficult to play about it, interestingly. There's something definitively King Crimson about it. There's something definitively, whatever this album is doing, it's in that. Something about the human condition, you know, that's scary. The relentless forward motion, Armageddon. But it has a resolution ending. Do 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 do, which is really strange and interesting. I think I really like it, but you wouldn't expect that. You expect a sort of let it to fade out or something. But it's okay. But it does make the album perfect.
Yeah.
In a sense, yeah. So so although it's definitive and not definitive, it's still 6 eggs.
Of course, I'll give it 6 eggs. I don't think you could give it anything other than 6 eggs, really.
Yeah, very special album. Everyone has to hear it. If you haven't, why not? Yeah, see you next week see you next week on the Wenton Nave for Zoom Club. And see you next week on the Wenton King for Dunno, because we're recording this really early. So see you next week.